Good afternoon. My name is Arul, and I hope you all are able to hear me and you're able to see me. If you're able to hear me and see me, please give me a yes. If you're able to hear me and you're able to see me, give me a yes. So at least I know I'm not talking alone, right? Are you able to see me? Anyone? Okay, thanks a lot, Janet. Okay, so today, yeah, thanks a lot. So today, for today's webinar, it's a shorter webinar than usual. We'll roughly take about an hour and a half. So today's webinar, it's about understanding the definition of wages, right? It's a very important component of employment, wages. So what is defined as wages? How do the different laws in Employment Act, EPF Act, EIS, SOXO, HRDF, how do they, how do they define wages? So we'll cover that a little bit today. So welcome to the HR Forum. And for those of you all, if you're listening in for the very first time, let me just invite you, or shall I say, let me just officially welcome you to the HR Forum. So the Malaysia HR Forum, apart from being an organization, being a training provider, we are also Malaysia's fastest growing platform. We are roughly about 3.5 years old, and as of today, we have got over 40,000 members, comprising of HR practitioners, business owners, and many others who are into the topic of human resources. Now, my advice to all of you all who are listening in today, if you happen to be a HOD or a HR leader or a section head or even a business owner, I would encourage you to get all your team members to join the HR forum. It's a free platform. There's no cost, there's no charges. All you have to do is answer three simple questions and you become a member of the HR forum. And in the HR forum, what we do for the public as part of our capacity building platform or our capacity building agenda, we have a lot of knowledge sharing. For example, the webinar today is one of them. So we do share policies and documentations and tools, guidelines, FAQs, templates, and many more. Plenty of discussion on various aspects pertaining to employment regulations, the employment world, employment issues, employment trend, and so on and so forth. If there's a concern on certain parts of the law, how do we entangle this? How do we unravel? How do we understand this? How do we go deeper? So all this happens in the Malaysia HR Forum. So I would encourage you to share this platform with your colleagues who are in the HR platform, even if you would like to share this with your respective stakeholders, business leaders, please do so. We are happy to have all of them on board so that they can also learn together with us. Sometimes as HR, it is a little bit difficult to convince the bosses. Sometimes the bosses may not trust you, or sometimes bosses wants a third party view. He do not just want to hear from you. The bosses, whether it's a he or a she, may also want to hear from a third party, right? Maybe a second opinion. So the platform could be a good area for them to get diverse views on the topic or the issue that you're facing. So again, I would like to welcome you and also invite your colleagues to join the HR forum. And so the slides that we are presenting today will be shared in the HR forum in Facebook. We will not be emailing to you. So after this session is over, within half an hour or so, we will upload these slides in the forum so you can download the slides, and there are a couple of links that we are going to share. So you can actually get these links from the slides that we're going to share later. Okay, so a little bit about myself. My name is Arul. I think many of you all do know me. We have had many interactions, be it in live or face-to-face or in conferences and trainings. So I have over 22 years, maybe a little bit more than that. I've been in various industries, in training, in education, in manufacturing, in consulting. And today, my role is as a consultant, a trainer. What I do is I train people on HR topics, on forced labor, prevention of forced labor, on topics such as leadership, talent management, and many other things. And so today's webinar is one of the things that we do as much as we could. On a quarterly basis, we have this free webinar series. We cover multiple topics, and the idea is to give our HR practitioners, our HR forum members, some ideas on these topics. Sometimes you just don't know, where do I refer to? What does the law says? So webinars like this is useful to give you some ideas. Now, I must also tell you that these webinars may not be very comprehensive, may not be very extensive, because it takes more than an hour or two to really go deep into the topic. But we hope that webinars like this gives you the basic idea so that it helps in your next learning journey. And of course, if any one of you all would like to contact me, you can see my email address at the bottom of the slide, as well as my phone number. But of course, this is only for, you know, real emergency issues, etc. Otherwise, if you have any questions, you're more than welcome to post this in Facebook. And there are many HR practitioners, many seasoned HR leaders there who sacrifice, who do share their views and thoughts on the questions that you will ask or you may ask. Now, before I begin, I would like to just run through this favorite slide of mine, which I would always encourage all HR practitioners to do this like a mantra. It's a mantra for me. Every time I present a topic or if I do my trainings, I always have this slide as a reminder to me and also to remind all of you all that, what it says is this. If you think compliance is expensive, try non-compliance. So what it simply says, right, what, this former US Deputy Attorney General, Paul McNulty, is trying to say is, compliance, it may sound expensive, right? And because we think it's expensive, we try not to follow. We try to cut corners. We try to, find all the creative way how not to pay. For example, should I include meal allowance into ORP calculation? Should I include attendance allowance into ORP calculation? Should I include commission, right? Or we say that if we include meal allowance, our salary that we're going to pay is going to be high, right? The gross salary. So we try not to include. Some employees may not be aware. So we take advantage of their, ignorance. Employees are not sure because they are not experts in employment law. We are, not them. So when you don't pay them, they may not know. But if there's a concern, if there's a complaint, if somebody queries on it and they realize that you have not included the meal allowance, for example, now you may need to calculate back last few months and pay these workers. And not only that, when we choose not to be compliant, if we are found to be non-compliant, there'll be lawsuits, there'll be fines, and it affects the brand and many others, right? So I would say that compliance is cheaper than non-compliance. But if you think compliance is expensive, then try non-compliance. But definitely, I wouldn't want you to try non-compliance. Let's comply. Now, the cost of compliance, we may think that it costs a lot of money. I would say that compliance is definitely not cheap. But it is also not so expensive that it's going to eat up into your profits, right? I'm sure every company, your organization, my organization, and many organizations out there, in our charter, we always say this: we uphold the highest, level of integrity and trust. But are we? What is the meaning of integrity? Integrity means we do things right even when people are not looking. So if we are a highly compliant organization, we believe in ethics, we believe in moral values, we are transparent, why are we not paying and doing as what the law wants us to do? So if we preach, we must follow, right? So that's very much on, this tagline by the US Deputy Attorney General: compliance is cheaper, non-compliance is expensive. Okay, so that brings us to the definition of wages. Now, we must understand different acts have different, or shall I say, the EPF Act, the Employment, Employment Act, HRDF, EIS, PERCESO, they do not have the same exact meaning, right? So in order to understand what is the definition of wages, you got to go into the respective act. So sometimes I know, for those of you all, if you're new, we think that Employment Act is everything. Unfortunately, Employment Act is one, EPF Act is another, PERCESO is another, HRDF is another, right? So you got to look into the various acts. But one thing I can tell you is there is a lot of similarity between this act. So let's look at the first two, which is Employment Act. The definition of wages is available in Section 2. So what it simply says is this: wages in Employment Act 1955 means basic wages and all other payments in cash for work done, but does not include A, B, C, D, E, F. So it doesn't include a value of a house, or if you supply them meals, right? Not give them cash allowance or cash meal allowance, but you provide them meal, right? That is not included. Or any contribution to Provident Fund is not included. Traveling allowance is not included. So traveling allowance and transport allowance is not the same. I will explain later in a subsequent slide. What is the difference between traveling allowance and transport allowance? So traveling allowance is not included, or any sum that you pay to the employee to defray the expenses. So for example, if I'm being stationed at another location and my company gives me certain allowance for me to pay for my house, for the room that I'm going to rent. Now that is expenses, so therefore it is not included in wages. Or if there's a gratuity payment or retirement benefits, or if there's any bonuses, right? So these are not included into wages. So in other words, anything that you pay to the employee is wages except item A, B, C, D, E, F. Now, when we go to Employment Act, again, you can see there is some similarity, some differences. So you can see wages means what? All remuneration in money that you pay to an employee under the contract, or if it's apprenticeship. Now, this apprenticeship is not internship, right? It's two different terminology. Whether you paid on monthly, weekly, daily, otherwise, and it includes bonus, right? It includes bonus, commission, allowance. So you see the similarity under EA, bonuses are not included as wages, but under EPF, bonuses are included as wages. So these are the things that we got to take note of. So when we want to define what is wages under EA, is there's some differences there. Under EPF, there's some differences there. So if you can see, it doesn't include, it includes everything, right? I repeat again, whether you're paying them monthly, weekly, daily, or otherwise, and it includes bonuses, commissions, allowance to the employee, right? But it does not include, so all these are included, but it doesn't include service charge. For example, in a hotel, in the F&B industry, we pay service charge, that's not included. Overtime is not included. Gratuity is not included. Retirement benefit is not included. If you're going to retrench an employee, so the retrenchment or layoff benefit is not included, and traveling allowance not included. Or if there's any other payments that the minister would exempt from being defined as wages. So you can see the similarity between EPF and EA. For example, under EPF Act, overtime is not part of wages. So you don't pay EPF on overtime. So it is important for us to look into the different definition of wages. And these slides I'm sharing, so later part when you get these slides, in order for you to understand better, if you want to take a deep dive, if you want to study this further, click on the links that is shared. For example, if you want to know an EPF Act, there's a link at the bottom which brings you to EPF's website where you can read this definition in detail. Let's look at EIS. So EIS says that wages means all remuneration, whatever that you pay the employee in money, that means in cash, right? To an employee, including any payment in respect of leave. So that means under EIS, if you're going to pay on leave, holidays, overtime, all these are included. But what is not included, right? Number one, if you're paying to the employee any contribution to pension fund, like EPF, for example, traveling allowance. So you see, traveling allowance in all the acts is not included. So traveling allowance, expenses for special expenses, because they're working somewhere, you're paying them something extra, that is not an income. Gratuity, annual bonus, and so on. When you look at SOCSO on the other side, SOCSO says that wages means all remuneration payable to an employee, payable by you as an employer to an employee, includes any payment regards to leave, holidays, overtime, extra work on holidays, all these are included. But it does not include any contribution by the principal employer or the immediate employee to a pension fund, that is not included. Traveling allowance not included. If you're paying employee the sum of money to defray the expenses, right? Expenses. So remember, when you pay an employee because of an expense they've incurred, that is not an income. It doesn't go into the pocket of the employee. They got to pay it off. So that is not included. Gratuity payment or retirement, annual bonus, or any other remuneration that may be prescribed by the act of the minister. So these are again not included. So as a summary, I would like to say this. So different acts have different payment terminology or payment definition. So it is important for a HR practitioner, especially if you are in IR, if you're doing payroll, you must understand the different definitions by different acts, right? Now, I did not include HRDF, so I would urge you to also study HRDF. It is available in the forum if you want to. So look at what HRDF defines, wages. Now, let me also bring you back to the definition of wages in Employment Act. So our focus today is going to be on Employment Act. I will not be discussing on EPF, on income tax, on EIS, HRDF, right? I will not include that. So today's topic is very much on Employment Act. So when we look at Employment Act in Section 2, which is at the front part of the Employment Act, it defined what is wages. And of course, if you go to first schedule, which is at the back, there's also another definition of wages, but only for the purpose of first schedule. So I'll get to that later. So again, when we look at Section 2, it says this: wages means basic wages and all other payments in cash. When you pay an employee for work done, but it doesn't include item A, B, C, D, E, F. So let me bring you to item C, traveling allowance. So as I mentioned just now, traveling allowance is payable to an employee because they've incurred some money to travel. So it is not an income, but it's an expense. But when you provide transport allowance, so transport allowance is wages, right? So some of you all, I believe, I could be wrong, but I'm sure out there, sometimes we may have used this terminology interchangeably. It should be traveling, but we call it as transport. Or it is transport, but we call it traveling, right? So let me just bring you to what is the definition of transport and traveling. Now, transport allowance, right? So which shall be treated as wages. Now, if in order to define what is transport is traveling, the easier way to see is when you pay this employee, is this a documented expense? For example, an employee need to travel to Johor Bahru. I'm in KL right now, and because I need to go to Johor Bahru to service a client, there's a company's client, I need to go and visit them, I need to do a product demo. So I need to travel all the way to Johor Bahru. And I incur toll, petrol, and mileage, right? So, toll and petrol, sorry. So when I come back from my trip, I'm going to ask the company, please pay me back the toll and petrol that I've incurred to go to Johor Bahru. Now, that would be considered as traveling allowance. I've performed a trip, I've incurred expenses, so please pay me back, right? I want to reimburse, I want to claim for reimbursement. So that is called traveling allowance. But if you give them a fixed sum of money, okay, never mind. I'm going to give you every month 500 ringgit for you to travel, right? But you don't have a receipt. There's no proof that he actually traveled. You may be paying an employee 500, but the employee may come to work by LRT, or his spouse or her spouse may drop them to work, or they may walk to work. We do not know. So that would be considered as transport allowance. So if it's an expenses, that's why I would like to define this. If it's a documented expenses, it's traveling. If it's something that is not documented, you do not know whether they travel, you just give them every month a fixed sum of money, that is called transport, right? So that is the difference between transport and traveling. So now if you are using this terminology, interchangeably, that means instead of calling transport, by right, you should be calling it traveling, but you call transport, or vice versa. I would urge you to study this further and clearly define what is transport, what is traveling, right? So I repeat again, traveling allowance is not wages because it is an expense that has been incurred by the employee. If you pay him, it doesn't go in his pocket because he has already paid plus highway, he has bought fuel of worth, let's say 100 ringgit, he's got to be reimbursed because he's incurred the expense. But transport allowance, he may not have incurred any expense, right? So that is considered wages, whereas traveling is not. So I hope you have now a better idea what is transport and what is traveling. So let me go back to the definition again. So that is how wages defined in Section 2. Now, the definition of wages in first schedule, it is only to determine who is eligible for overtime and who is not, which I'll cover in my next slide. So now when we go back to first schedule, let me bring you back to this slide. So when we go back to first schedule, now remember the amendment that was made last year. Employees earning wages up to 4,000 ringgit, right? They are eligible for overtime. So who is eligible for overtime? Employees who are earning wages up to 4,000 ringgit, they're eligible for overtime, or those people who are entitled to, the manual workers, irrespective of the wages, they are entitled to overtime. as well as those people who are supervising manual workers. So these three groups, they are eligible for overtime. But those of you all, if you're not a manual worker, for example, if you're a HR manager earning 4,500 ringgit, or if you're a senior HR exec earning 4,800 ringgit, or if you're a production engineer earning 4,100. Now, you're not manual worker, you're not supervising manual workers, therefore, you're not eligible for overtime. So in order to determine the 4,000 ringgit, so we need to go and we need to refer to the definition of wages in first schedule. So what it says is this on the orange box on the right hand side. For the purpose of first schedule, wages means wages as defined in section 2, right? But it shall not include any payment that that is considered as commission, subsistence allowance, and overtime. So in other words, to determine the 4,000. So what we are doing now is to determine the 4,000. So when we want to determine 4,000, we will look at wages definition as defined in section 2, but we will not include commissions, subsistence allowance, and overtime payment. Now, then you go back to section 2, we have just understood what is section 2. Now, in order to give you a much more easier way to understand, I've combined these two and put it into this table. So how do we define wages in order to determine who is entitled to overtime, right, as stated in the first schedule? So you look at only item 1. So in order to determine what is the 4,000, you only take basic wages and all other payments in cash payable to an employee for work done. You only look into this to determine the 4,000. But all the other items you see down there, it is not included. So for example, the value of house or food that you provide to them, not food allowance, but value of food, contribution to provident fund, pension fund, traveling allowance. If you're paying a sum of money to an employee to defray the expenses that they may have entailed because of the nature of work or nature of employment, that is not included. Gratuity payment is not included. Bonuses, commission, subsistence allowance, and overtime. So all these items are not included. So in order for you to determine, now if you have an operator, or maybe if you have a, let's say a supervisor, or if you have a, let's say a technician, or let's say a production manager, etc., or anyone, maybe a F&B manager, are they entitled to overtime or not? So you look at only the first line to determine whether they are part of the 4,000 or above 4,000. So let me give you a little bit of illustration, right? So maybe before that, so you can see the item at the bottom, subsistence allowance. So what exactly is subsistence allowance? Now we know that Employment Act did not provide the definition what is called subsistence. There's no definition provided. Now when we look at the meaning of subsistence allowance, so this was from dictionary.com. What it says is this. Now, money given in advance to an employee to buy food, clothing, or pay for other necessities while awaiting the first pay, or money paid to worker, if you pay some sum of money to worker, in addition to the salary to cover expenses that they incur in order to perform their job. So this falls under subsistence allowance. But I would advise you to seek guidance. If any allowances that you're paying or any money that you pay, it doesn't matter what you call it, whether it falls into the definition of subsistence allowance. Okay, so now, as I said just now, in order for you to determine who is earning up to 4, who is earning below 4, that 4,000 mark. So the first step is you look at wages in first schedule and you look at wages in second schedule. Now, once you have determined what is the 4,000, who is in it and who is not in it, who is above 4, below 4, once you have determined, okay, for example, I've got an employee and his name is 𝙁𝙊𝘾𝙄𝘼𝙇𝙎, right? So his role is, he's a project coordinator. I'm paying him a basic salary of 3,500 plus a fixed allowance of 500. That's it. No commissions, nothing. So what is the total wages? So we know that fixed allowance is not expenses, so it is wages. So 3,500 plus 5 is 4,000 ringgit. So now I've determined that 𝙁𝙊𝘾𝙄𝘼𝙇𝙎 earns 4,000 ringgit. Therefore, he is entitled to overtime. So today, for the month of December, he has worked overtime. How do I calculate OT? You only look at step number 2 using the definition of wages in section 2, right? So step 1, it's only to determine whether the employee of yours, he or she or they, are they eligible for overtime, is step 1. Once you have determined whether they are eligible for overtime or not, in order to calculate OT, then you use step 2. So I hope you've got this clear. So this is a simple illustration of whether or not the employee is earning above 4 or below 4. So this table, it's basically step number 1, right? So this is step number 1. So now we are determining who is eligible for overtime and who is not, step number 1. So we need to look at first schedule and wages defined in section 2. So I've combined this and let's look at it. Now, for illustration 1, the basic salary is 4,000, no allowances, no commission, no overtime. So therefore, the total wages this person is earning is 4,000. Are they entitled to overtime? Answer is yes. Now, illustration number 2, this employee is earning 2,500, allowances 1,002, no commission, but there's an overtime. Now, we know overtime is not included when we determine the 4,000. Therefore, it is rate not included. So the total wages is only 3,700. Because it is below 4, therefore, this person is also eligible for overtime. Illustration number 3, basic salary 3,008, allowances 1,500, commission is not included. Remember, commission, overtime not included. Therefore, the total wages is 3,950. So this employee is also eligible for overtime. And illustration number 4, 3,008 is the basic salary, allowances is about 300 ringgit. So total wages is 4,001. Now, we assume this person is not a manual worker. Therefore, wages above 4,000, because he's earning above 4, right? So because he's earning above 4, and he's not a manual worker, therefore he is not eligible for overtime. So is he eligible? Not eligible. So this is how you do, step number 1, to determine whether the employee is eligible for overtime or not eligible for overtime. So let me bring you back to this slide. So what I've done is, I've only taken basic wages and any other payments in cash, but did I include commission? No. Should we include bonuses? No. You only take item number 1, then you see a green tick. And okay. So what we have done is, we have just finished step number 1. That is to determine whether this employee is earning up to 4 or above 4. Right? So the table just now, illustration 1, 2, 3, 4, that is step number 1. Now, once we have determined who is eligible for overtime, so if this person performs overtime, how do we pay overtime? So that we need to look at section 2 only, which is wages and all other payments in cash, but it doesn't include A, B, C, D, E, F. So for example now, if this employee of yours, let's say if you have a production engineer earning 3,950, nothing else, only basic salary is 3,950, no allowance, no commission, nothing. So would he be eligible for overtime? Answer is yes, because he's earning below 4. So how do I calculate OT? So we need to look at the definition ORP. And what do I include? You include basic wages and all other payments in cash. Now, I believe many of you have seen this table before. So the minimum wages that took effective last year, 1st January 2000, sorry, this year, 1st January 2023, that pays an employee, effective last year, but because of the changes, right, on the basic hours, so this is the formula that you see. If an employee is on a monthly wages, you pay him 1,500, right? This is the new minimum wage. And if he's on a 6-day work week, the wages per day, it's about 5,769, 57 ringgit 69. If you're paying him on daily for 5 days, it's 69. 4 days is 86.54. And if you're paying him hourly, it used to be 7.21, but because now the hours per day has reduced, right? Sorry, hours per week. Remember, before this was 48 hours, now it's 45 hours. So if you're paying hourly, the hourly rate has increased from 7.21 to 7.69, right? So this is to give you an illustration of the hours. What do you pay them If you're on monthly, you pay them in 1,005, daily and hourly. And I think you must also be aware there are also other methods to pay an employee. You can pay them on, piece rated, commission based, tonnage or trip based, right? These are other payment mechanism. So how do we calculate the hourly rate of pay and the ordinary rate of pay? Now, I believe many of you all are aware on the formula in the green box, right? When we say ORP, automatically we will assume that it is the monthly wages divided by 26 times 8. I mean, yeah, I will not worry so much about terminology. ORP means what? ORP is ordinary rate of pay, that is a 1-day pay. So ORP. But HRP is hourly. So when we take the monthly wages, let's say the monthly wages is 2005, divided 26, we get 1-day wages, right? Why divide 26? Because EA is defined in a way, or designed in a way, in a month there's 30 days, 4 Sundays, right? You minus 4 is 26 days. So 26 work days. So when we want to, in order to calculate 1-day pay, you take the 1 month wages, divide 26. But in order to calculate 1 hour salary, then it's HRP, so monthly rate of pay, the green box, monthly rate of pay, divide 26, divide 8 hours if it's 8 hours work per day. But if your employees are working 6 days a week, 7.5 hours, then you divide 7.5, right? So I'm sure you all are familiar with this formula. And so again, in order to compute the ORP, what are the components that we need to include? So again, we look at section 2. So in section 2 is defined as, so what is ORP defined? ORP, ordinary rate of pay, means wages as defined in section 2, whether you calculate on a monthly basis, weekly basis, daily, hourly, piece rated or otherwise, that you pay an employee, but it does not include, right? When you calculate wages, it doesn't include, right? Sorry, when you calculate ORP to determine OT, you don't include any approved incentive payment. Now, this approved incentive payment is not an incentive payment that your management approves. These are incentive payment that Labor Department approves. So if you have an incentive payment, you want to exclude from ORP, you need to get approval from Labor Department. Not your boss says, okay, this year we're going to give an incentive plan to our employees. And can we include the ORP or should we include? Answer is yes. If you want to exclude it, it must be approved by Labor DG. So you don't include any approved incentive payment. You don't include any payment for work done on rest day and public holiday. In other words, when you calculate ORP, you don't include the so-called the rest day OT. I know some of you all define, if an employee works on rest day, we tend to call it rest day OT. That is not included. Or public holiday OT, that is not included, right? So the pay for work done on rest day and pay for work done on public holiday, you do not include into ORP. So to give you a better illustration, you can see the table on the left and right, wages in section 2, everything is wages except traveling allowance. Remember, transport allowance is wages, but not traveling allowance. So everything is wages except traveling allowance. But in order to compute ORP, work done on rest day, work done on public holiday, approved incentive plan, it is not wages. But everything else is wages, and you exclude traveling allowance. So got it? So I hope you can digest this table. And to know more, go to Employment Act Section 60I. It is the interpretation of things. So read under this Section 60I, what is the definition of ORP, HRP, and so on. And so calculating overtime, right? I know early part of this year or last year, there was a lot of confusion. Should I divide 8? Should I divide 7.5? In the past, we divide 8 because EA is designed 26 days of work, 8 hours per day. So you divide 8. But now the work hours have been reduced to 6 days times 7.5. So if your employees are working 6 days a week, 7.5 hours per day, you divide 7.5. But if you're only working 5 days, 8 hours per day, you divide 8. Or maybe your company works 5.5 days. The first 5 days, employees are working 8 hours, and on Saturday, they're only working 4 hours. Should you divide 8 or what? You divide 8, right? You look at the first 5 days, 8, you divide 8. And now these are overtime. So this is just another illustration. When should you divide 8? When should you divide 7.5? So I'm going to leave these slides with you. It's a bit tricky for me to run through because of time factor, but look at it. But I would like to advise members who are listening in today. When we draft our work hour policy, take note of words, the terminologies we use: paid break, unpaid break, right? When we say it's a paid break, that means you're paying for the break. If we say unpaid break, that means the break is not paid. So sometimes this terminology, these small things can give you a bit of headache, right? So if it's paid break, that means you're paying for the break. That means part of work hours. If it's unpaid, that means it's not paid. So this table gives you an idea. When you divide 8, when you divide 7.5. And the overtime rates and the pay rate for work done on a rest day and public holiday. So normal day of work, that means Monday to Saturday, right? Monday to Saturday is normal days of work. Those of you, if you're on a 6 days work week, you're working from, let's say, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Now, these are normal days of work. So if an employee works beyond the normal hours, so the normal hours for 6 days work is 7.5. If the employee works more than 7.5, right, that means they work 9 hours, 10 hours, 11 hours, that means they're working overtime. Overtime, you calculate 1.5. On an off day, you also calculate 1.5, right? The first 8 hours, the next 4 hours. Now, if you're going to ask me why off day, should I pay more than 1.0? Because rest day is 1.0, the first 8 hours. Why on an off day I should pay 1.5? I'll explain the next slide. Rest day, the rate of pay for next day, rest day, the first 8 hours is 1.0, the next 4 hours is 2.0. Now, these are illustration for those on monthly pay, which is common practice out there. So public holiday, the first 8 hours, they are entitled to 2 times the rate, and the next 4 hours is 3 times the rate. So got it? Now, why the off-day rate, it's 1.5? Why? Why is it not 1.0? So in order to understand this, we must first understand what is EA stand on off-day. Firstly, if you read EA, you will not find the term off-day. EA doesn't define off-day because EA is designed for 6 days work. So let me explain further. Let's say if your work week starts on Monday until Sunday, right? Sunday is a rest day. And if you're working on 6 days work, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, these are the normal work day. So normal work day, if you work more than the regular hours of work, your normal hours of work, you're going to pay at a rate of 1.5. So Saturday, which is a work day, the day number 6 is a work day, you pay 1.5. But if you choose to only observe 5 days work, which is Monday to Friday, right? Saturday becomes an off day, but this definition is not in Employment Act, right? It becomes an off day. So off day, you still follow the same rate that is provided by EA. EA says that the first 6 days is 1.5. Therefore, Saturday automatically remains as 1.5, not 1.0. Rest day rate remains the same, 1.0 for the normal hours of work and 2.0 for the subsequent hours, right? So I hope this is clear. So when we look at section 59.1 on rest day, it says this, every employee shall be allowed in a week, right? In 1 week, that means 1 week is what? Is 7 days. In every 7 days, right? They must be given 1 rest day. And this rest day is the last day of the week. So for example, if it's Monday to Sunday, Sunday is the rest day. If it's Thursday to Wednesday, Wednesday is the rest day. You cannot change the sequence. It cannot be rest day first, then off day. I know there's some practice out there as well. We give rest day first, then off day. No. Off day comes before the rest day. So if you are having a practice, rest day first, then off day, you might want to check whether you are compliant or not. So it is always off day first, then rest day. So if it's a 7 days work week, you only work, 7 days, in a 7 days, you work 5 days, it's work, off and rest. So off comes before rest. And the maximum permitted overtime, right? And this is stated in the Employment Regulation 1980 on limitation of overtime. So what it says is the limitation of overtime for Section 60A 4 is 104. Now this 104 is only for normal days. So why 104? Remember, there's 26 days, normal days, 26 days in a month. 26 times 4 is 104, right? That's how we got 104. And this 104, it does not, it excludes. That means it doesn't include work done on rest day and public holiday. So that's 104. So now, can we exceed 104? Boleh tak kita melebihi 104? You can, but you got to apply for approval from Labour Department. There's a form for it. Okay, so who is entitled to overtime? Remember, I was telling you just now who's entitled to overtime. So this table will give you a better understanding, right? Now, there are two category of employees, those people who are entitled to OT and those people who are not entitled to OT. So this, in order to understand this, we need to go back to section 1, first schedule, which says this, employees who are engaged in manual labor, manual workers. So those people who are doing repeated job, operators, technicians, F&B, waitress, etc. So this group, they are considered manual worker. Of course, you want to know what is manual worker? There are two links I've shared in the bottom. Read it later when you're free. Manual workers are those people who are doing manual work more than 50% of their time. So if you have a lorry driver, for example, and this lorry driver, he only, maybe a van driver, this guy, he need to deliver spare parts. And he only spend about 30% of his time delivering. He need to go to client's place, deliver spare part, pack it, unpack, deliver, come back, and so on. But 70% of his time, he's doing planning, purchasing, inventory management, right? So chances are he may not be a manual worker, right? So read these two links, and I think the first one under by Donovan and Ho, they've written a very clear description who is defined as manual workers. So now, if the employee is a manual worker, or he or she is involved in operation or maintenance of any mechanically propelled vehicle, or if he or she is supervising or overseeing other employees engaged in manual labor. So these three groups, right, manual labor, or those people who are maintaining any mechanically propelled vehicle, or those supervising, right, if they're earning below 4, of course they're included. OT is, and they are eligible for overtime. If they're earning above 4, they're also eligible for overtime. So in other words, if you have a supervisor who is supervising employees, right, operators, and his wages is 7,000 ringgit, he is also eligible for overtime. So because I've heard from discussions and so on, people earning above 4, no OT. Answer is not true. If they are manual workers, if they are supervising manual workers, it doesn't matter what they earn. Even if they earn 15,000 ringgit a month, they are eligible for overtime. So, right, please read this. Now, what about other employees? So who are other employees? Whoever is not in the first box, right? You see the first box on the left-hand side. Whoever is not in the first box, let's put them as other employees. So let's say if you have a clerk, a HR clerk, a finance clerk, maybe you have, let's say, a planning executive, engineer, a fresh graduate. Now, these are considered other employees, a director, engineer, manager, right? A specialist, right? These are other employees. If these people are earning below 4, that means, if their wages are up to 4,000, they are also eligible for overtime. But if these people, they are earning above 4, they are not eligible for overtime. So who are those who could be in the red box? Would you like to share me some examples? Right, so at least I know you understand what I'm saying. Who are those who will be in the red box? Anyone? Just give me, we have almost 200 people in the call today. So anyone, who are those people who are in the red box? Right, okay, I've got Adeline here, HR manager, you're right. Who else? HR manager earning above 4, right? Not here. If you have an admin clerk or admin executive earning above 4, they are in the red box. Your finance director, if you are paying them salary, they have a contract of service, earning 12,000 ringgit, they're in the red box. Who else? Right? VP, right? So those people who are earning above 4 and they are considered other employees, not manual laborers, not supervisors, etc., they are in the red box. So I believe many of you who are listening today, you might be in the red box as well. So those people in the red box, no overtime, right? No public holiday pay, no rest day pay. That means if they work on rest day, the rest day provision, public holiday provision, termination benefit provision is not applicable to those people in the red box, right? So that's the first schedule. So now those of you all, if you're still not very clear on this, there's a webinar on the amendment that was made to Employment Act. We have gone through in detail who are this category. So I would urge you to, it's a recorded webinar on HR Forum in Facebook. So perhaps you may want to download the slides and listen to the webinar, right? So this group of people in the red box, they are not eligible, or shall I say they are not covered under the overtime provision. Now, one advice to you, some of you may have somebody position, right? The title is supervisor, but they are not supervising any manual laborers. It is high time for you to revise your business title. It does not mean if the title is called supervisor, automatically they're eligible for overtime. No. We need to look at the task. So when is the last time you reviewed your business title? Was it 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago? Now, if you do not revise your business title or review your business title must always be based on the job scope. So if you have an employee who was the supervisor once upon a time, and today the title is still supervisor, he may think that he's eligible for overtime. But he may not be eligible if his role today is no longer supervising employee. He is now, let's say, he might be doing planning, or he might be doing inventory control. Now, he is definitely not eligible. So if you have someone title, the business title is supervisor, but he's not doing any supervising job, and if he's earning 5,000 ringgit, he should be in the red box, not the green box. So I would urge you to review your business title, right? Every year, if possible, or every 2 years, review your business title. Make sure the business title, that is given to them and the job they are performing at that time, is in sync. Okay, so that's one. Now, a question to you, can we cap the wages? In the past, remember, our OT is capped at 2,000. Can you cap OT? For those people in the green box, you pay OT based on the wages they earn as defined in section 2, right? As defined ORP, as defined ORP. You cannot cap. If let's say the total wages as defined under ORP is 3,008, you pay based on 3,000, you calculate based on 3,008. For those people who are manual workers, let's say you have a lorry driver, the total wages defined under ORP, right? It's 7,005. You need to base on 7,005 and not put a cap at 4,000, right? But for those people in the red box, if you feel okay my HR executive, he or she works long hours because too much of work, right? Or maybe a finance executive, every month they have to work long hours because of financial closing. I want to pay them something. Finance executive earning above 4, they're in the red box. Now, if you want to pay them something, you want to compensate them for the extra work they put, this group, you can discuss with them. Perhaps you may tell them that, okay, for all the work you do, I give you 1 day off, or I give you 100 ringgit, or maybe I still pay you overtime, but I'm going to limit at 4,000. Now, the red box, you can limit. You can put a cap, but not the green box. Overtime, right? So now this, I'm sure you all have seen it. So OT, it is now from 48 become 45. I'm not going to ask you why is it 45. We have covered that in the amendment. But just note that work hours is no longer 48, it is 45. and this does not include break time, right? Break time, if they are on break, they're not working, they're resting, they may be taking a short nap if you allow them, for example. Now that is not work hours. Work hours are 45, meaning that they are working. If they're at the workstation, they are performing their job, they are at your disposal. That is called work hours. So 48 has become 45. Okay, and this formula has also been established formally now in Employment Act. We've been using this formula for some time, but now it is official. So if we are going to calculate, when you calculate wages for those employees who did not complete a full month, maybe they're resigning halfway. For example, today is what? Today is 13th of December. 13th of December, they resign today. So you calculate the wages from 1st to 13th using this formula. Or an employee joined today and they work throughout December. So the wages from 13th December until 31st December, you use this formula. So monthly wages divided by number of days in the wage period. So if you are following monthly wages, calendar base, that means from 1st December to 31st is 31 days. Times multiplied by number of days they've worked. So for example, if I join work today 13, so let's say from 13 to 31st is total about 18 days. So my salary, my monthly wages is 5,000. So 5,000 divided by 31 times 13 days. So that's how this formula works. Okay, so when should you pay wages, right? When should you pay wages? Wages, you can break up into two. Wages defined in section 2, right? But you don't include the rest day pay, public holiday pay, overtime pay. So wages excluding rest day, public holiday, overtime, you must pay no later than 7 days after the wage period. So let's say now if I'm on a monthly wage, my salary is paid from 1st to the end of the month, right? So December is 31 days. So my wages must be paid no later than 7th of January, right? So if it's now January, my salary must be paid no later than 7th of Feb, right? 7 days, no later than 7 days. I think you all are very familiar with this. But rest day pay, public holiday pay, overtime pay, you can delay, but you must pay before the next wage period. So rest day pay, public holiday pay, overtime pay in in December. I know many pays in December itself or by 7th of Jan, but you can delay it, but you must pay before January expires, right? So I know some of you all may be doing this for overtime. It's good to pay all one go by the 7th, but if your process is a bit complicated, you can pay this before the next wage period. But if you ask me, rest day pay, public holiday pay, I think the practice out there generally is to pay in the same month, except for OT, some will pay later. Now, some companies, their practice for wages is they don't follow calendar. They follow certain cutoffs. For example, 26th of the month to the 25th of the next month. It is also allowed, right? But officialize it, formalize it. So, or it can be from 16 to 15. Some of you all may have two cutoffs, basic wage cutoff and overtime cutoff. So, basic wage cutoff could be calendar, overtime cutoff could be 26th to 25th. But for me, sometimes it's very complicated, right? It's very complicated to have two cutoffs, but it's common out there in some companies. And when should we pay, right? When should we pay wages? So this is when it comes to termination. Now, if an employee is terminated under Section 20, you might want to read what is Section 20, Section 21, Section 22. It must be paid no later than the day when the contract is terminated. So if the contract last day is today, if terminated today, must be paid today. But if the employee is terminated under Section 21, in bracket 1, right, the contract is terminated, he must be paid, again, shall be paid not later than the day on the day the contract is terminated, which is today. But if the employee is terminated under Section 21, 2, right, these are for special circumstances of breach of contract, you must pay not later than 3 days after the contract is terminated, right? So it's either 1 day or 3 days. These are for termination. But if the employee is not terminated, 7 days, no later than 7 days after the wage period. So, I would urge you to, take this slide, open up EA, what is section 20, what is section 21 in bracket 1, what is section 21 in bracket 2, right? Read it out. Advances. Can we give an employee salary advance? So what does section 22(1) says? No employer, that means you as an employer, you cannot give an employee advance, right? So let me read the paragraphs so that I'm clearer. No employer shall during any 1 month, you make to an employee an advance or advance of wages that a person has not earned, which exceeds the total amount, right? Aggregate the amount of wages which the employee earned in the previous month from his employment, right? And of course, it says this, or he'll be working, etc., to enable him, right? If this advance, right, unless this advance is made to the employee for purposes A, B, C, D, E, right? Other than this, you cannot. Got it? So read this further to understand what you could give, and I mean, advances are given for what purposes and what is the limitation. So do read it. What about deductions? Right. So deductions, there are some deductions which are considered lawful, and there are some deductions which you can only make at the request of the employee, and there are certain deductions that you can only make when the employee requests, plus you must obtain approval from the labor DG. So let me run through each and every one very quickly. So what is considered lawful deduction? If you have made overpayment, that means you overpaid salary in the last month, wages last month, and we can only take the last 3 months. So let's say now is December, you have paid extra, you didn't realize it. Now you realize in the month of September, October, November, you paid the employee extra, which he should not be entitled to. Now, you can make deduction, or if the employee resign and not able to pay you the notice period, you can also deduct from the final wages. Or if there's any deduction approved, if there's any deduction for recovery of advances, you made an advance. Remember the advance salary under section 2, but you cannot charge any interest, right? Or if there's any other deductions authorized by any written law. So item D would be deduction for EPF, income tax, right? Or maybe the employee has written to you for zakat. Now, these are all allowed, or PTPTN. So, okay, and what are the deductions allowed at the request of the employee? So deductions that, if the employee is part of a trade union, right, or maybe if, let's say a subscription, or maybe what do you call it? Some, those things that is provided for legally, where it says that these are allowed, but with the written employee. So one of the common things that I can think of is, if the employee is member of a union, that union fee falls under the green box. Now, under the blue box, if an employee requests to you items A, B, C, D, E, you can deduct after obtaining approval from labor DG. That means not just employee write to you, but you must also obtain permission from labor DG. For example, if there's a contribution to some welfare scheme, insurance scheme, right? All this you must get approval prior. So if there's a rental, so read what is A, B, C, D, E. These are items that employee can write to you and apply for approval, and if approved, then you can deduct. So that is lawful deduction. And under section 24(8), it says this, total amount of deduction, right? It cannot exceed 50% or 15% term of the wages employee earns in a month. So let's say this month the employee's total wages earned is about 3,200. So the maximum that you can allow, that you can deduct is up to 1,600. So 3,002, 50% is 1,006. It cannot exceed 1,006. But this limitation, right, this limit of 1,006, for example, in the case of employee earning 3,2, it will not apply for indemnity, notice period, right? You want to recover the notice period, it doesn't apply. You can deduct more than 50%, right? Or deduction from final wages if there's any amount due to you as an employer, or if there's a deduction for repayment of housing loan. But again, subject to prior permission from the labor DG, right? It may exceed 50%. So you can check that out as well. Okay. Yep. And so calculation of wages, ORP, annual leave, unpaid leave. So when do I use 30 days? When do I use 26 days? So if it's wages, right? Wages in complete month or unpaid leave, you divide calendar, which is 30. Because when you calculate salary or unpaid leave, you're paying 1 day pay that you're not going to pay them because they did not come to work, you divide calendar. But to determine ORP and annual leave encashment, you divide 26. Why 26? Because annual leave is only for 26 days of work. People don't apply annual leave for rest day. They apply annual leave for normal days of work. So normal days of work is 26. ORP is calculation for overtime pay on normal days, which is again 26. Now, some people like to ask this, can I divide 22? Can I divide 20? Because my company only works for 22 days a month. You can. 22 is more favorable than 26. So if you're going to use a formula that is more favorable than what is provided for, please go ahead, right? You want to use some, because why? Now, take this, try this out. 3,000 ringgit divide 26. What do you get? 3,000 ringgit divide 22, you get a higher output. So higher output means it's more favorable to the employee. No problem, go ahead. Right? EA says this, you can use any other formula, but it cannot be less favorable than the formula provided for by Employment Act. But my question to you is, do you really want to use 22? Okay, good times, no problem, right? Good times is like for some companies, during good times, they only remember Christmas. Give, 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 give. But during bad time, you want to claw it back, you want to pull it back, it becomes tough, right? So my advice is follow the formulas provided by Employment Act. If you want to appreciate your employees, those who perform well, right, those who contribute, you give them extra increment, extra bonuses. But try not to, use different formulas. We always remember good times, but during bad times, you want to pull this back, it becomes very difficult. Because when you start giving it, it becomes an implied condition, right? So again, I repeat, you can use any other formula. Maybe you want to divide 20, 22, you can, because it is more favorable. So wages for ORP and annual leave, you cannot divide 27 or 28 or 29 and 30. You must divide 26 or any other formula. That means you can use below, you can use 25, 24, 22, but you cannot use more than 26. And another thing to take note of is full-time and part-time employees. They also have a little bit different definition of full-time, part-time. So full-timers are those employees that works 31.5 hours or more of their full-time hours. Part-time employees are those who work 30% to 70% of full-time hours. So if full-time hours 45, 30% is 13.5 hours, 70% is 31.5. So employees who work between 30% and 70% of full-time hours are part-timers. Those people who work more than 70% or 45 hours, they are full-timers. So the entitlement for full-timer, part-timer is not the same, right? For example, I don't know whether I've left. Okay, for example, I did not put it here, but this is just more of overtime. If you look at overtime, for full-timers on a normal day, they will be working, they will be paid 1.5 if they work exceeding their normal hours of work. But for part-timers, it is 1.0 if less than 8 hours. It is 1.5 above 8 hours, which is quite similar, but just that part-timers, their hours are not 7.5 minimum per day. Okay, so just have a read this. The annual leave entitlement is also not the same, so please check it out. Now, in order to, where can you get these details? Look into the employment in bracket part-time employees regulations 2010. A copy is saved in the HR forum. You can also get it from Labor Department's website. Now, the one in red, casual work, right, or home working, those people who work less than 13.5 hours, right, they are not under Employment Act. They are not part-timers, they're not full-timers. These are people who work, below 13.5. Those people, let's say the shopping mall, they come during seasonal or weekend, they come and work for 3-4 hours, right? They are not considered part-time nor full-time. They are casual and they are not covered under Employment Act. So please check that out as well. Okay, so I've done, my main slides. Let me just, run through a few advertisements before I, pick up your question answer. So for those of you listening today, we have also launched our comprehensive IR and EA advisory package, uh, 15,000 a year, which is 1,250 ringgit a month. Now, those of you all, if you're already subscribing to any other advisory service, please continue. We're happy with it. But those of you all, if you are not subscribing to any advisory service, and if you need one, right? If you're always having trouble with EA or IR matters, don't know who to ask, right? You can call us, but of course, subscribe to our advisory package. So this is open to any companies, irrespective the number of employees that you have, right? We don't follow number of employees. So it is, we cover on basic EA and IR advisory, basic advisory on social compliance if you are under certain social compliance audits, or if you have a union, you want basic advisory on collective agreement, you want us to do a basic review of your handbook or SOPs, right? Basic review of documentation, but handbook, sorry, I made a mistake. Handbook and SOPs are not included. Let's say we're going to issue a warning letter, show cause letter, a domestic inquiry, charge sheet. You want us to just go through and see whether, okay, yeah, we can do that for you. And the beauty of this arrangement is every month you have a face-to-face workshop, one workshop per month for 12 months, which are covered in my next slide. You can always call us Zoom or come and see us at our HR forum office, right? You're welcome to come and see us anytime if you need advisory. And also along this, whenever we launch any employee handbook or any guidebook, you get it for free. Today is a public webinar, it's open to all, but we also have private webinars for our clients, right? There's a private webinar, any documentation, templates, guidebooks. Now, all those documentation that you see in the forum, there are also other documentation that we don't share, right? And if you're our client, you get the editable copy and the updated copy, right? For those of your clients. And whenever we have conferences, you get free passes, right? We're having a conference on 5th or 6th of May. If you're our client, you get a full meal package. But if you're coming a visitor, you get the bento set, right? Or any other paid conferences, you may get free passes. There's terms and conditions to it. Any public programs that you join, if you're a client, you get 15%. And once our academy is up in March next year, you can use our training rooms, complimentary. Or sometimes we may call you in, hey, I've got a TNA training, right? For example, we have a full 2 days TNA training. Some of our clients, we do give them complimentary trainings as well. So this is what you get for 15,000 a year. Is it expensive? I don't think it's expensive for the rate of 1,250 per month with all these freebies. Now, the uniqueness of this advisory package is this. The 12 modules that you will be attending covers 9 compulsory modules and 3 optional modules that you can choose, right, from the optional modules. Now, these compulsory modules is, the purpose is, we don't want you to always call us. Yeah, you can call us when you have questions. Hey, Arul, I got this issue. What do I do? Okay, I can give you the answer. We can give you the answer. Our advisors can give you answers. But when are you going to get yourself trained? Are you going to rely on phone calls for the rest of your life? Right? Or you need to start learning up things. So these modules allows us to train you on how to prepare letters, right? How to manage industrial court hearing, how to prepare for conciliation processes, how to terminate employees. So we don't just want to help you. We do, when you are hungry, you come to us saying that, hey, I'm hungry, can you feed me? Okay, I feed you for today. But we also want to teach you how to catch the fish. Maybe after 1 year, you may tell me, Arul, I think I'm quite capable now. I don't need these services anymore. No problem. Right? So if you think that, wow, 15,000 expensive, now just ask yourself, if you are paying for advisory service every year, paying 6, 8,000, 10,000 every year paying, for the last 5 years, you may have paid 50,000. Right? Now, we don't want you to, it's nice you pay us every year, but our objective is to train you up, is to build your capacity. So once you complete these 12 modules, which is part of the 15,000, that one person, if you're the company rep, this is for you, you will be issued a certified industrial relations practitioner certificate by the HR forum. And there's a peer support, right? So by going through this 12 months, right, this 1 year journey with us through this advisory package, if you are the person in charge, just imagine the knowledge that you will have after 12 months. right? Not just calling us for help, but we will come to you and train you up for the 12 months that you're with us. Okay, and of course, those of you all, if you want a handbook template, this is free if you're a client, but if not, you can purchase this. Now, for those of you all, if you want an employee handbook template, you have not done up your handbook, whether your foreign workers handbook or local employees handbook. These are guidebooks that handbooks that we have. You can buy it. It's editable, soft copy, and you can just within a day or two you can launch your handbook. So if you don't have one, you're struggling, this will help you to speed up your work, right? The foreign workers handbook is compliant with social compliance audit standards. So if you are having audits by all these certification bodies for forced labor and migrant workers, this handbook will easily pass through the audits, right? It covers all those elements that the auditors want to see. And of course, this year we are full house done. If you want to join a 2 days masterclass, right? We talk about all the fundamentals of EAIR. We talk about shortcuts, how to issue warning letters in 30 minutes. If you're doing 3 days or 3 weeks, 1 week, 2 weeks, I do it in 30 minutes. How? I will cover this in this class. How to simplify work, how to simplify tools, what are the amendments to law, and what are the strategy, the tacticals. All these are covered in this 2 days masterclass. Okay, so let me just pick up your questions. Right? Okay, so let me just pick up a question. Okay, let me just. Okay. Okay. So let me just pick up, the questions that you may ask. I may not be able to answer everything, but I will try to answer those relevant questions. Okay, got it. Okay, so I always have difficulty to pronounce the name. �12𝙊𝙊𝘾𝙄𝘼𝙇𝙎. Sounds Indian, but she's a Malay. Okay, I know her. So salary up to 4K, must pay OT. Employee can make complaint if you do not pay. And now the fine, right, is no longer 10,000. The maximum fine per offense, right, it is now 50,000 ringgit. 10,000 was the last time. Now it's 50,000. So if you don't pay, just remember this. Let's say we decided not to pay certain item into wages, or we didn't include into ORP. Now, if an employee complain, and if labor were to come and inspect, audit you, and they realize you did not follow the right method, number one, the maximum fine that you can be compounded 50,000. Number one. Number two, right? Number two, you have to pay back. So compliance is cheap or expensive, right? So it is cheaper to just pay what the law says and follow. Now, if you want to find ways how to reduce costs, look at other methods. Don't touch wages, right? Don't touch or don't go against what Employment Act says. If Employment Act says that all this has got to be in, it has got to be in. If you want to reduce costs, look at other methods. Look at productivity. Look at efficiency, right? Look at tardiness, improve behavior, right? Look at performance. Those are ways how to improve profitability as well. So, but never touch wages or never go against what Employment Act says. So there's another question. 12-hour schedule, 9 hours work, 1 hour OT, divide 9. The maximum, denominator is 8, not 9. Even though they're working 9 hours per day, the maximum denominator is 8. You can use 7.5, or you want lower, it's fine, because the employee gets more. But it cannot go beyond 8. So 8 is the formula, wages divide 26 times 8 is already provided for. You cannot make it less favorable. You can make it more favorable by using 7.5 or lesser, but you cannot use more than 8. Okay, there's a question by Jennifer. So long as the allowances are fixed amount, is it included in wages? I think it's yes. If you're paying any allowance and you call it fixed allowance, it is part of wages, because as long as whatever that you pay, it is not covered in A, B, C, D, E, F, right? The exclusions are given. So the beauty about the definition of wages, it is already clearly provided for. Basic wages and all, see the word all, basic wages and all other payments in cash is included, except A, B, C, D, E, F. So any item that you're paying today, if it falls under A, B, C, D, E, F, it is not included. But if it's not A, B, C, D, E, F, it is included. As easy as that. So fixed allowance divide calendar day or 26 days for incomplete month. Now, for incomplete month, remember wages. First, you define what is wages. You calculate all the wages first. Then you divide the, for example, if December is 31, so wages divide 31, multiply by the number of days they worked in a month. So for example, if an employee resigned today, today is the last day. So it is going to be, and the wages they've earned is 3,002. So 3,002 divide 31 times 13, because today is the last day. Okay, so let me see, how do I scroll this up? It stops there. Okay, okay, got it, okay. Okay, so let me just pick more questions. We got time, so not to rush. Okay, how to calculate ORP for working day 5.5? So if you're working 5.5 days, let's say Monday to Friday and Saturday half day, so it's going to be wages divide 26 times by, I believe in the cases of 5 days, if Monday to Friday, for example, if the employee is working 8 hours basic, you divide 8. Even though on Saturday they're working only 4 hours. So if it's 5.5 days, look at the hours they're working on the first 5 days, that will be the denominator. So deduction for short notice, yes, because indemnity, it's an allowable deduction. So if an employee is supposed to serve, let's say, 2 weeks notice period, but he could not serve, he wants to go right away, immediately. So you deduct the notice period from the balance wages. The wages he has earned for the month that you're going to pay him, you deduct the 2 weeks. So that is allowed, right? So short notice, yes, you can deduct. Unpaid leave deduction for more than 3 months considered lawful deduction. Well, if an employee did not work for 3 months, for example, he's on long medical leave, he's exhausted his sick leave and hospitalization leave, right? And he's on unpaid leave. You don't pay him anything. So he did not work, no work done. So no work done, no wages. So I wouldn't call this deduction, but you're not going to pay him at all, 0 for 3 months. Okay, how do you calculate OT for part-timers who are paid on hourly basis? Go back to the formula. I've shared the formula in the table. If you just read through the formula, you'll get answer, right? So I may not want to spend time here. Okay, there's a question, and this is a very interesting one from Jack. If time off in lieu is applicable to compensate my staff who may have worked exceeding work hour instead of OT pay. Now, in other words, this employee is eligible for overtime, but the company prefer to give time off. That means, okay, today since you work 3 hours extra, your work hours finish at 5 o'clock, the employee work for 3 more hours, which is actually OT, but instead of paying him OT, the company says, okay, never mind, tomorrow you can come late 3 hours, right? Is this allowed? I would say it's no, because Employment Act says this clearly. If an employee works beyond his normal hours of work, he is eligible for OT. It did not say you can pay OT or pay time off or annual leave. So overtime has got to be paid with overtime, not time off, not annual leave. So I know if the practice is to give annual leave because you want to save money, unfortunately, you got to pay overtime, not giving time off. Okay, this question is on manual worker. Is a mechanic or company driver considered a manual worker? Chances are yes. Please read the link that I've shared with you, because they're doing repetitive work, right? Okay, aircraft engineers. So this is a very interesting question. Aircraft engineers earning 5,000 per month or more, are they considered as a manual worker? An aircraft engineer, I don't think is considered manual worker. He makes decision, he's intellectual, he's trained, right? He's not those who does repetitive work, right? These are people who need to make judgment. So similarly, a lorry driver and a pilot, one drives lorry, one drives a plane. But the lorry driver is a manual worker, pilot is not a manual worker. So you should be able to see the difference there. And another example, a painter, right? A painter who paints portrait, right? If I were to paint your portrait, is not a manual worker, but the guy who paint buildings, right? Those people who are painters, paint buildings, they are manual workers. So these are some comparison you can look at. Freelancers are not under Labor Act. Now, Employment Act says this, anyone with a contract of service. So you must have a contract of service. That means you must have an employment contract. You are then an employee defined as under Employment Act. But if you are a freelancer, you're not under Employment Act. Okay, that's all the questions you all have for me. Okay, okay, hold on a second. Hold on a second. Okay. Okay, yeah, there's a few more questions. Okay. How if company said, right, they are willing to pay me allowance 300 as petrol claim and is able to delay payment for next month? Now, when you say petrol claim, it's a claim, right? That means you have performed a journey, you have traveled, I mean, the company is paying you this. So maybe your question is a bit mixed up. If it's a fixed allowance, it's part of wages, must be paid in the same month. Sorry, must be paid no later than 7 days. It's part of wages. But if it's a claim, right? A claim is not wages. It's not defined as wages. So typically, company would pay you by the end of the month together with your pay, right? Or they may want to pay at another date. So remember this, anything that is wages must be paid for December, for example, must be paid by the 7th of January if it's wages. But it excludes overtime, rest day, and public holiday. These three items you can pay before the end of January, before the end of next wage period. But if it's wages, that means your basic salary, your allowances must be paid by the 7th. Right. So now this question is a bit tricky because Sally says allowance and then she said petrol claim. So if it's an expense, it is not wages. But if it's an allowance, it must be paid by the 7th of the next month, of the, after the wage period. KPI bonus paid every month, considered as commission. Well, see, this is very tricky because you say KPI, bonus, and then we say commission. Sometimes the terminology that we use can be very, very tricky. So why complicate things? If it's a bonus, call it a bonus. If it's a allowance, call it allowance. Right? If it's commission, call it commission. So I would not want to call it as KPI, bonus, and then whether it's commission. Now, very simple. If it's commission, it is wages, right? To determine wages, section 2. If it's commission, it's wages. But if it's bonus, it is not wages. So Sally, I would advise you to go back, to read back what is defined as wages under section 2 and reorganize your terminology so that you don't get confused and your employees don't get confused and there's no dispute, right? Read what is defined as wages and see whether you need to review and refine the terminology that you use, right? And I think it's not just for Sally, all of you all in the call today, we may not have reviewed the labels that we use, maybe because of past practices. But now with the changes to Employment Act, more employees are covered under EA and so on. It is high time for you to review your labels or your definitions, right? Not just Sally, all of you all. Okay. Okay, let me see. internship allowance, referral fee, and one-off bonus, sign-on bonus is considered wages. Now, to answer this question is very simple. Internship allowance, referral fee, and one-off bonus, are they part of A, B, C, D, E, F? This is how I would define. You might want to get a further opinion from Labour Department. If these items are not A, B, C, D, E, F, then it's part of wages, right? So we must remember this. When E was designed, all these items that we created, I'm not sure whether, employment at that time, when it's defined what is wages, they've taken all this into consideration, but these are things that we created over a period of time. But unfortunately, we'll go back to Section 2. So the way I see Section 2 is this: everything else is included except A, B, C, D, E, F. So any items that you have today, review back under A, B, C, D, E, F, and see whether it should be part of it or should be excluded. And my question to Lesin Karina, internship allowance, right? Firstly, internship are not employment, right? Interns are not employees. So if you're paying an intern allowance, by right, they're not employees. So I don't think there's a question here. But a referral fee, because somebody introduced an employee, you're paying a referral fee. Now, this fee, check back whether it's part of A, B, C, D, E, F. Now, if you're not sure, speak to Labour, get their input. I'm not sure whether there's a provision for you to apply to Labour to exclude part of wages, right? Anyway, these are one-time payment. So for me, I will not worry so much about one-time payment. One-time payment, it's a small matter. But if it's going to be recurring, very frequent, and the sum is high, then you might want to consider whether you want to still practice this or do a review of it. So working hours from 8 to 6, right? 8 o'clock to 6 o'clock is how many hours? 10 hours, right? 8 to 12 is 4, 12 to 6 is 6. So 10 hours, 1 hour break. So the employee working 9 hours per day. So can the employee work overtime from 6 to 9? Now, if you go back to the work hour provision, it says this, an employee cannot work more than 12 hours per day, includes overtime. So if, let's say now, if this total hours is not more than 12, that's okay. But if it's more than 12, you should not. But if your business requires so, speak to Labour for exemption. Right? So 8 to 6 is 10 hours, minus 1 is 9. Now, my question to all of y'all, can you ask an employee to work 9 hours per day? Because Employment Act says not more than 8. So if you want to ask an employee to work for 9 hours per day, you need to get employees' consent. And this is also covered in the Employment Act Amendment FAQ produced by Labour Department. If in the past employees are working 8 hours per day, and now if you want employees to work 9, you can, provided the employees agree to work 9. You cannot force them to work 9, right? It is provided. Check out the FAQ produced by Labour Department last year, for the amendment. It is covered there. One of the questions is on 9 hours work per day. Let me see. Okay, so 8 hours is the minimum, right? It's not the minimum, I would say it's maximum. 26 wages, divide 26 times 8. That is the max you can use. You can't use 8.5, you can't use 9.0. So the max you can use. So you cannot divide 9. The max is 8. Even though they're working 9 hours per day, the max is 8, right? You might, I can't read Chinese, Mandarin, but whoever is asking this, please check with Labour Department again. Okay, for manual workers, if the wages exceeded 4K, can the employee refuse not to pay OT? Can the employee refuse not to pay OT, even though company willing to pay OT capped at 4,000? Okay, so this is a very interesting question. This employee is not a manual worker, because we know manual workers, no matter what they earn, whether below 4 or above 4, if they do overtime, we got to pay them overtime. But this question is, the employee is not a manual worker, but the wages is more than 4,000. The employee don't want to be paid OT, right? It's a very strange question. I don't know which employee don't want to be paid OT. This is because the employee considers his wages is more than 10K and calculation cap at 4K is underpaid. Okay, now I get you. So that means the employee says, my salary is 10,000. And he is not under the OT bracket because he's not a manual worker. So salary, let's say, for example, I give you an example easier. The employee is a finance manager, right? And he's working overtime. He's working more than 45 hours. The company says, I'll pay you OT, but I'm going to limit the OT. I'm going to cap the OT at 4,000 ringgit. Now, legally, you're not wrong because he's not under the OT provision. But employee is unhappy. Now, the employee also will tell you this. Now, my legal hours is 45. As per the law, 45. I don't want to work. Right? Why should I work more than 45? So what are you going to do? Right? So in this question, it is not that he don't want to pay. Of course, who don't want to pay? He wants to pay, but he wants to be paid. The calculation should be 10,000. You follow the formula, 10,000 divide and so on and so forth. I would say the answer for this is you should have a formula that employees agree, right? So if employees refuse to agree, I would suggest review the work, review their KPI, make sure they're productive, they work efficiently, work effectively, and start managing performance, right? Sometimes the problem is this, when we draw a JD, right? When we draft a JD, when we design a JD, we never design a JD. Sometimes, a person's work hours only 45. So the JD that we drafted, is it, compatible with 45 hours work per week? Now, if the JD requires a person to work 60 hours per week, then there's an issue with the JD, not the employee. There's an issue with the JD. So there's no quick answer for this. One, talk to the employee, work out a win-win formula, or maybe give him replacement annual leave for this group. Tell him that, okay, if you work X number of hours, I give you 1 day off, credit into annual leave. Or maybe go back to the basics of designing a JD. If 45 hours, 45 hours. Now, the company not willing to pay more EPF and the petrol claim is not required for receipt. Well, I think we got to go back to EPF Act. Now, this is nothing to do with Employment Act. Go back to EPF Act. Now, if EPF Act says this, a traveling allowance is not included. So if this person, right, has already performed a travel, he traveled for the work, and he wants to get this claim for petrol, then it's not wages, right? But because your company says, okay, no need receipt, right? I will just pay you, no need receipt. Then I would consider this as transport allowance and not traveling allowance. So the terminology you might want to review again. Should you call this transport or should you call it traveling? Piece rate for employee. So employees who are hired on piece rate basis. There are some organizations like plantations, for example. Now, they don't pay employee basic salary. They still earn 1,500, minimum, but it's not on like how your calculation is. For example, you must work 45 hours if you work OT. They are paid on piece rated. So for example, now I'm going to hire you now. You need to produce 3,000 pieces of this every month, right? Every piece you produce, I pay you 550 ringgit. Sorry, 5 ringgit. So if you produce 3,000 pieces, okay, maybe I make it more simpler. Now, I'm going to hire you as a packer. Your job is a packer, you got to pack. You got to pack 1,500 pieces of this every month. Every piece you pack, I pay you 1 ringgit. So if I pack 1,000 pieces, I'm only being paid 1,000. If I pack 1,005, I'm paid 1,005. The minimum quantity you got to give him is 1,005. Now what happens? I pack 1,005, but I stay back at work. That means I don't go back after 8 hours. I stay back. That means I work beyond my normal hours. And I pack more than 1,005. So even though they are piece rated, they are also eligible for overtime. That means their overtime calculation would be every piece I pack after my normal hours of work, if I'm not mistaken, is 2.0, two times the rate of the piece rate. That means if I pack this during normal hours, it's 1.0, 1 ringgit. If I pack after my normal hours of work, please check it out. I think it's 2 ringgit. There is a write-up in the forum. on piece rate calculation mechanism. So those of you all, if you are employing anyone on piece rate, download this write-up written by 𝙎𝙊𝘾𝙄𝘼𝙇𝙎 and myself, which is on piece rate mechanism. Some of you all may be applying the piece rate mechanism wrongly. So it is good that start reviewing it. I mean, in the past, if you're not sure, never mind. But today, since you have heard me saying piece rate mechanism, they are also eligible for OT, but the method of calculation is not the same as how you calculate for those people on monthly salary. So check this out in the forum. Okay, meal allowance, fixed meal allowance given to employee outstation, but finance asking to provide receipt and not allow HR to include EA form. Well, I think this one, you and finance, you got to thresh this out. So this is a domestic issue. HR and finance, they're not in sync. I would suggest HR to get very clear definitions of what allowances has got to be part of wages, what allowances not part of wages. If the allowance is part of wages, it has got to appear in EA form, right? And finance got to pay it. So I think this is a domestic issue. You and finance, please sort this out. Nobody can help you if you and finance don't sit down and understand what the law says about allowances. Nobody can help you, right? Okay, now this is a very interesting question. Ka asked this. What is the difference between allowance and incentive, right? What is the difference between an allowance and incentive? See, from, if I'm Employment Act and I can talk, I will tell you this, Ka. Why you create all this terminology, incentive and so on? Because Employment Act says what? Payments, basic salary and all payments in cash for work done, but doesn't include one item is traveling allowance. But when you create incentive, right? Now, incentive, you pay someone because they've done some good job, or maybe there's a sales incentive. Now, when you calculate ORP, that's part of wages. Whereas an allowance, if the allowance is paid for expenses, it's not wages. But any other allowances is wages. So sometimes it is good to review these terminologies you use. So I would advise companies, if you have so many labels, allowance, incentive, bonus, special payment, and whatnot, why not review these terminologies? Review these labels, right? The best source to refer, right, or the best source to see what is the right way to call, go back to Employment Act. It is given very clear guidance. So if your label that you're using today is really out of the blue, or really is something that is a bit difficult to understand, simplify it, right? I mean, I don't have further advice for car, but allowance and incentive, I got to ask you what's the difference, right? If you're giving incentive, I got to ask you why you give incentive. Why not call it allowance? Why not call it sales allowance? Why call it incentive? So, and also to this, if you have an opportunity, all of you all, if those who are listening in, if you have an opportunity to review labels, the labels you use, refer back to Employment Act. The problem with us sometimes is this: when we design our business model, when we design our salary com and band, our salary philosophy, com and band, and all those things, we design first. We design it, we publicize it, we make all the announcement, and then we check the Employment Act. Change the concept a little bit, change the approach. When you design, check first with Employment Act. Check first with, what EA says. If whatever they've designed is in line with EA, then I would say, safe bet, go ahead. But whatever that you want to design or you're designing is not in line with EA, do further check. Maybe make a trip to Labour Department, get some guidance or clarification or advice from Labour Department, and then refine your model. And then you move on. And this is not only for wages. Even when we design work hours, we shop, we design work hours first. Oh, I want employee to work like this, like that. Especially in retail, in restaurants, split shift. And after we design, now we start cracking our head. Hey, how am I going to do this? Then you start making phone calls. Encik, I nak tanya. WhatsApp here. How my company? So when you design your work hours, your business model, your salary, composition, your labels, always fall back to what EA says. Then, if it's in line, go ahead. If not, get further guidance. And the best department is labor department. Then you review and finalize it. Okay, can employer impose cash penalty via salary deduction for negligence, right? That cause financial loss to company. Now, Mazdia, I can safely tell you, answer is no, right? If you look at all the lawful deduction, any salary penalty because of negligence is not stated there. Under, there's 3 boxes, remember? Lawful deduction, deductions at the request of employee, and the third one is deduction at the request of employee with approval from labor. This doesn't fall in any 3 boxes, so it is not allowed. You want to recover the loss, you can do it via civil claim, right? Please check this out further. So our company calculate 45 hours per week. 9 times 45 equal to, 9 hours per day times 5 hours per day, which is 45 hours. Sorry, why am I getting confused? 9 hours per day multiplied by 5 days a week. So 9 and 5 is 45. Are you wrong? You're not wrong. But remember this. If you look into the EA work hour provision, it says work hours no more than 8 hours per day. Now, if you want employees to work 9, you must get a written consent from them. Make sure the employees are okay. If the employees are okay, no issues, right? But if employees are not okay, then employer will say, I'm forced to do it. So always get employees' consent for this, for the purpose of exceeding 8 hours per day. Catherine, transport allowance, staff will be taxed. Now, that one we got to look at, EPF Act, what is taxable, what is not. But, as we speak, we have a peer group, right? The HR forum members, we have formed a peer group. So this group is reviewing all the definition of wages. There's a subgroup that's working on EPF. There's a subgroup working on income tax. What else? Employment Act, SOXO. So they are going through all the various items. What is taxable? What is EPF payable? What is not? So Kat, you might want to wait for this table to be out. Okay, for OT, the maximum OT is 104. If above 104, can we convert as allowance? Answer is no. OT is OT. You got to pay overtime. You're not supposed to exceed 104. If you exceed 104, that is already against the provision. So there is a mechanism for you to apply for exemption to exceed 104. But I would advise you not to exceed 104. So for Jamuna, if you're exceeding 104, I can tell you, you might want to take note that the limit is 104, but there is a provision to apply for exemption, but not apply for exemption after exceeding. Apply for exemption before exceeding. So there is a borang, you can submit to Labour Department to exceed the 104 hours. Can we have different ORP? Can we have different ORP in some company for HQ and retail staff? As HQ works for 5 days, retail staff work for 6 days. Now, I personally don't see anything wrong. To me, it must go back to the employment contract. What does your employment contract say? So it is always safer to define all these provisions very clearly in the employment contract. So if this employee is working on shift, and this is what the OT is. If the employee is working at HQ, this is what the OT is. But then again, is it worth having 2 separate overtime policy? Can your payroll, see, if you're having 2-3 staff, okay lah, you can do manual calculation. If you have 200 staff, can your payroll system have 2 different formulas? So this is something to ask. I would say, I think it's doable, but make it very clear in the conditions, terms and conditions, or their employment contract. If you're working on, in retail, this is the ORP. So, but my question to you again is it necessary to do it? Is there a big difference? 8 and 7.5. If you divide 8, divide 7.5, is there a major difference? If it's going to save your company thousands of ringgit, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions, maybe yeah lah. If it's just a mere 2, 3, 4, 5,000 ringgit, is it worth it? Right? Having 2 formulas. Can your payroll system cope with it? Okay, the Act says we cannot simply deduct employees' salary without their consent. My company is going to kickstart a club. Some companies, they have this sports club or recreational club. Next year, every staff need to contribute 10 ringgit per month. What's the procedure? There is a method for you to apply. If you're going to start up a sports club, there is a method for you to apply for deduction, right? So go to JTK's website or even go to HR Forum, search for borang-borang dan permit JTK. There's one form for you to fill up for this purpose, right? To get a blanket approval so that after this, employees can apply and you can deduct, right? Remember the 3 boxes. The last box is this item. For for what is considered allowable deduction, employee right, labor approved, you can deduct. Okay, I think, let me see if there's any other interesting questions. So Najiha asked this question: basic salary allowance and OT must include EPF, SOCSO, and EIS. Najiha, I would urge you to go back to the slides I've shared today. The first, I think the slide number 3 or number 4, the definition of wages based on different acts. For example, in EPF Act, overtime is not applicable. So that means you don't pay EPF for overtime, right? So review the different acts. It's slide number 3 or number 4. So commission, okay, this is an interesting question by Melo. Commission depends on sales. And it is not a fixed amount. Any guide on the amount to include to calculate ORP? Very simple. Different month, the commission different. So that means every month your wages, let's say for example, my salary, my basic salary is 2005. So 2005 plus commission, I got nothing else, just 2005 plus commission. So last month my commission is 3,000 ringgit. 2,000 ringgit. That means my wages this month for ORP calculation, it's what? It is 2,000 plus 2,500, 4,500 if I'm a manual worker, right? And remember this, commission is not included in the definition of first schedule. So you got to include, if last month is more, this month less, you follow what is the total basic salary plus commission. So there's no fixed formula for this, right? Any guide on the amount to include, you got to include the actual commission into ORP. Now, do you know there are also companies out there who pays employee, there's no such thing as basic salary for them. It is entirely on commission. But of course, the minimum that they must be able to earn is 1.5. So can you pay an employee entirely based on commission? You can. So in order to know more, I would again advise you to go to the forum, right? HR Forum Facebook. There is a document, there is a write-up by Haji Hussein and myself on wages paid by commission. How to calculate OT. What is basic, what is salary by commission? That means if you pay them, you don't pay basic salary, you pay them commission. What is it? How is it? How the OT? So there's a write-up. Please download, read it. There's tons of information available in the forum. So if you don't make the best use of the forum, you are at the loss, right? You are at loss. So I would say that make the best use of the materials and resources that we have in the forum. Okay, so I don't think I have any other questions here. Those interesting and not repeated ones, I don't think there's any question here. Okay, so yeah, there's another question here. Maybe I missed this. This is a question from Nurul Akila. And what Nurul asks is this. Employee is a manual labor. Employee is a manual labor. Company don't want to increase the salary to 4K because cost had allowance of 800. So total wages is 4,002. Can the company change OT to start from 56 hours weekly and above? Okay, let me try to understand this question. Employees the manual labor. So we know that manual labor, overtime is irrespective of wages. Even if they're earning 7,000, if they are manual workers, they are eligible for overtime. So their salary is below 4. So the company don't want to increase to 4. Now, their current salary, basic salary plus allowance, total is 4,002. Now, you got to pay them OT, not consider OT to start after 56 hours, no. If they work beyond 45 hours, OT is payable. Or on a daily basis, beyond the normal hours of work, OT is payable. So I don't think it's possible, Nurul. So for those people who are manual workers, overtime is applicable irrespective of the wages they earn. Okay, maybe this one last question from Chong Yen. Company don't want to pay more in bonus and pay allowance. Company don't want to pay more in bonus and pay allowance. When generate bonus, only use salary amount, exclude allowance. So this allowance need to deduct. This allowance need to deduct when have no pay leave. So this is a very interesting question. Company, okay, this company pays bonus. Sorry, they don't want to pay more bonus and allowance. So when they decide the bonus formula, when generate amount, we only use salary amount. That means basic salary, actual allowance. That's okay. Many bonuses are paid based on your basic salary and not your allowances, which is fine. Now, bonuses are extra. You're paying over and above what their contract says. So, which is fine. You can decide any formula. A bonus can be 1 month pay, 1 month of their basic salary, can be half month, can be a quarter, can be 1.5. It's up to you. But because the employee has taken no pay leave, can we deduct? This allows me to deduct when I have no pay leave. So when the employee has no pay leave, right? For example, the employee took excessive no pay leave. You want to give lesser bonus, that's fine from the bonus amount. But whatever salary you pay them is based on earned salary. So for example, let's say now my salary this month, my basic salary is 3,000 ringgit. Now I was absent, right? Or I took no pay leave or unpaid leave for 5 days. That means this month, I will not get, December, right? 31 days, right? I will not get 31 days pay. I'll only get 26 days pay. Or if I took 10 days of unpaid leave, this month my company will only pay me 21 days, not 31. But when you pay bonus, if your bonus is based on basic salary, then the bonus has got to be paid. If my salary is 3,000, the bonus 1 month is 3,000. But if the company has a condition that the bonus amount shall depend on also the no pay leave and your performance. So you need to have a matrix, right? If no pay leave of this amount, what is the bonus payout? So you can decide and define your bonus formula. I hope I've answered your question correctly because it's a bit tricky the way you've asked. Okay, OKU staff. Deaf and cannot communicate as a salesperson, only brochures and tablets to promote product. I would say that yes, they are also similar to promoters. I would say they are manual workers because they're just giving a repeated job, just give, right? People come, just give. That's manual work. So I don't think they are not manual workers. I believe they are manual workers. Please check this out further. So Chong Yen clarified the question that she asked just now. They will only pay bonus, use salary. Yeah, that's okay. So bonuses is what you're paying over and above. It is not contractual, right? If you say contractual bonus, it's usually based on your basic salary. That is why when you define what is bonus, define very clearly. Bonus equal to 1 month of your basic salary. But if you say bonus is 1 month of your wages, chances are it is going to be basic plus allowances. So define very clearly what is bonus. So bonus is 1 month equivalent to your monthly pay. But again, even if you use monthly pay, it's a bit tricky. Now, an employee may say, what's my pay? Is it my basic salary and allowances or only basic salary? That is why it is good to be as clear as possible. Company shall pay you 1 month bonus equivalent to 1 month of your basic salary. So make it crystal clear, no dispute, no ambiguity, no confusion. Okay, so I think I'm going to stop here, right? Okay, maybe last question, Chong. There's another 2 more, but I think time's up. Yep. So what is the difference between contract for service and contract of service? Chong Yen, please attend my masterclass, or please attend any IR training or EA training. This is covered. Now, every HR practitioner, you must know these basic terminologies and labels, right? If you're a HR practitioner, my advice to you is don't rely learning EAIR from WhatsApp group, from Facebook, asking people through phone calls. And that means your learning journey is like you trying to fix a jigsaw puzzle. Bits and pieces here and there, you fit a puzzle. Oh, now I'm expert. It doesn't work that way. You must attend formal class. You got to make the investment. If your company is contributing to HRDF, there are so many training programs out there by so many training providers that trains you on what is EAIR. So it is basically very sad to see HR practitioners out there or business owners, if you're listening in here today, please invest in knowledge. It is never a waste. When you invest in knowledge, you get to do things right. You get to do things fast. You become very productive. You become very, very efficient. You avoid mistakes, which can be very costly. And the training is not going to cost you millions of ringgit. A 2-day training will cost you about 2,000 plus. So please invest in time. Please invest in knowledge. If you have no time, I suggest don't go holidays, because holidays is waste of time. Go and learn, right? So contract for service, usually when you engage contractors, freelancers who are not employees, who are not working full time, who are doing work for you and for many other people, that is contract for service. Contract of service is an employment contract that you and I have, right? For example, if you work Mondays to Fridays, 45 hours per day, this is your JD, you can only work for me. You cannot work for others. That is contract of service. So contract of service is an employment contract. Contract for service is a contract for contractors, freelancers, suppliers. Those are contract for service. Okay. Yeah. So my advice to HR practitioners, please, embrace knowledge. Don't try to learn EA and IR from WhatsApp group. Some of you all join so many groups, hoping you can learn. WhatsApp group and Facebook can supplement your income. It's additional, tambahan. But the basic knowledge of IR and EA and employment laws, please go to a formal training. There are plenty of training programs out there by plenty of companies, plenty training providers. Please go and attend training and get yourself equipped. Don't try to be an IR or EA person. You're handling disciplinary issues, employment issues, and you just learn bits and pieces from WhatsApp and here and there. I can tell you, you're asking for trouble. You apply something wrongly, it becomes a disaster, you answer your bosses. So please go and learn up. If you're company with HRDF, tell your bosses, I need to learn. I need to know how to work on this, right? So WhatsApp group can be an additional know-how. So I would like to end the session now. So before you go, for those of you all, if you're very serious about improving yourself and doing justice to your company, how do you run a job of EAIR if you're not competent? So if you want to do justice to your company, you want to improve your own personal knowledge on EAIR, I would advise you to bring this up to your bosses, join our advisory package 1 year. After 1 year, chances are you don't need an advisory package after that, right? So consider taking this up, and there are 12 modules that you will need to go through, which is part of the 15,000. And I believe once you do this, you should be able to write letters, you should be able to draft your handbook, you'll be able to do investigation, you will know how to manage DI, you will know how to prepare for IR hearing, or or how do you terminate employees with medical issues, and so on and so forth, right? So with that, thank you for listening, and I will share these slides in the forum in the next 15 minutes. So please remember to download it. Don't email us, hey, where's the slide, etc. It is in the forum. Please download it from the forum. So thank you so much, and have a great day ahead. And I hope this webinar has been useful to you in some ways. But again, these are just some basic ideas. I would advise you to read these slides thoroughly, read the Employment Act, and if you're still unsure, you can always seek guidance from Labour Department, very friendly people. Talk to them, Ask them, I would like to know further on this, etc. But more importantly, please invest in a training, right? Join our masterclass if you can. We learn as much as we could, strategies, techniques, tips, tools, and idea of this. There are many trainings out there, and if possible, take up this advisory package and get yourself certified as a competent IR practitioner. So with that, thank you so much, and look forward to our webinars next quarter. Another series of webinars next quarter. This time will be different topics, and see you and join Facebook. Thank you.